And welcome back to Paranormal Now. I'm your host, Alan B. Smith, and I want to welcome you onto the airwaves and podcast waves as we traverse the cosmic highway of paranormal pit stops and tantalizing turnoffs. Tonight's guest is Epic's very own Bruce Fenton. Now, if you're not familiar with Epic Voyages, which you probably are as you're tuning into the Inception Radio Network, Bruce Fenton was one of the guest hosts that hosted Epic Voyages Radio, and Bruce is breaking ground with a new book now, and I'm sure, and there's no controversy here, that it is controversial. And I'm sure Bruce has come across his share of resistance in writing his book. Bruce R. Fenton is the author of the revolutionary Human Origins ebook series, The Forgotten Exodus. He was born in the historic English town of Cheltenham, England. He graduated from Anglia Ruskin University in 2002, having studied information systems. Fenton has earned the respect of his peers and made a name for himself in the research fields of ancient mysteries and human consciousness. A world traveler and public speaker, Fenton's research activities have also been featured in the UK's Telegraph newspaper. He was recently honored to receive an invitation to appear as a guest presenter on a popular Science Channel show. Fenton is a current member of both the Paleanthropology Society, and the Scientific and Medical Network. Working closely with a team at ForgottenOrigin.com, he continues to transform the current understanding of our shared origins. And quickly before we get to Bruce, just a friendly reminder, you can also listen to the Inception Radio Network on Live 365, Stitcher Radio, Nobex Radio, TuneIn, iTunes Radio, Streama, Shoutcast, Winamp, WinMedia Player, QuickTime, Roku, and of course you could always call in on a landline or your cell phone if you don't have an internet connection to 401-283-6700, and the live feed is constantly playing there. And and also you can follow me on Paranormal Now on Facebook, Paranormal Now Radio, and on Instagram at Paranormal Now, which is where I usually hang out. And for more future posts about the show and about this episode, definitely go to the Facebook page and you can find out more there. Okay, so Bruce, welcome to Paranormal Now. I'm glad to have you on.
Thank you very much. It's really great to be on, Alan. I appreciate you inviting me on.
Oh, absolutely. It's my pleasure. So let's start with before the Forgotten Exodus and talk about how you even got into any of these alternative fields in the first place.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, really, I suppose my first interest in ancient mysteries came about when I was about 10 or 11. I used to get given these little collectible cards from my grandmother. Would get them in her tea leaves, and each one would have a mystery on it, like crystal skulls or the Yeti or something like that. And it would just have a little bit of information on the back, and a photograph relating to the subject. Sure. And yeah, it was really that was my first kind of introduction to paranormal, ancient mysteries, all those kind of strange subjects. And yeah, it really kind of, I guess it just clicked. I already had an interest in fossils and I suppose ancient prehistory and dinosaurs and fossils. And I used to go around looking for fossils, in the stones where I went. So I suppose I was inclined towards the ancient world, naturally. And so from there, it kind of built on a bit. I began to read, obviously, some of the heavier books as I got older. I mean, at 10, it's a bit early to pick up a sort of 600-page tome on ancient history. But yeah, certainly it was an interest that, it grew over time. And then I had a few weird and wonderful events, strange sort of, I guess, psychic, paranormal things happened, which encouraged me on that front. So took a lot of interest in any information coming out from those subjects as well. But yeah, certainly the ancient mysteries side, it's been, I suppose, it's been a draw, since that early age, and it's just developed over time and become, I suppose, a major part of my life now.
Right. And so the book, The Forgotten Exodus, it focuses on the Into Africa theory. This isn't exactly paranormal, right? I mean, this is what you think is quite normal.
Yeah, this is very normal, and it's more in the ancient mysteries side of my interest than the paranormal side. Right. I suppose it has elements of the conspiracy side as well, in that I think there's at least some people that must be aware of the same scientific conclusions I come to, but perhaps protecting their careers, or have other reasons to not sort of out the situation and say, look, hang on a minute. So,
oh well, I mean, evolution in general for some people, just the idea of evolution is non-acceptable. They just won't believe it in the first place.
Oh, sure.
So that was a fight, a conquest to win the dominant, ears and theory to say that yes, evolution is a real thing. So that was a hard fought, win, and yet now, as time has gone by, I feel like with each decade, that theory has been tweaked. We learn new things and challenged.
Yeah.
But this is more of a bigger leap, I would say, rather than just adding on to the evolutionary path that we originally thought was that of the human. We have Denisovans and Neanderthals and so forth, and we've understood the human branch, the tree branch, and the tendrils of different hominins. But this is not challenging that, right? It's just saying how it all began is different.
Yeah, yes and no. I suppose there is some elements for challenging that, but there's it's a radical overhaul. I mean, it certainly would be the biggest change, in the story of human evolution that's come about in at least the last 3 or 4 decades. I mean, if we go back to, I suppose, really the 1980s was really kind of the beginning of the sort of global acceptance of out of Africa theory. I mean, previous to that, there was, a sort of a strong consensus that humans most likely came from Asia. So, I mean, people forget in a way that, these things, these paradigms do change. And, as a friend said, you can't, well, it's not so much change. You can't really sort of change or modify a paradigm. I should say it's displaced. I mean, because really, it's either it stays in place or it's displaced. It's very difficult to say we're going to change bits of a paradigm. Right. So the out of Asia paradigm really was displaced by the out of Africa paradigm when two professors, Can and Wilson, came out with this sort of seminal paper on this sort of, the ancestral Eve in Africa, and showing that they found that the genetic evidence supported this sort of, this 200,000-year-old ancestry of Homo sapiens going back to Africa. And at that point, really the whole paradigm really shifted towards Africa, and by the sort of the 90s, there was a near consensus. Certainly by the turn of the millennium, you had a global scientific consensus in place. But I say that because we have to keep in mind that these paradigms do get displaced. So although what I'm proposing is radical, in some respects it's no more radical than that last displacement.
Well, sure. I mean, if we went back in time and someone first said, "Oh, we think people came out of Australia," then would it be so radical? Probably not. It just would have been, the first of theories or new theories, right? And then people would look at it and decide whether it's true or not. But because that didn't happen, and people were looking to solidify their own theories or hypotheses, which, like you said, started with Asia, and then eventually migrated to, no pun intended, Africa. I feel like you're right. It's a paradigm shift, and it's only because it's just how the language and the dialogue began. So now you're after so much work and effort has come to solidify the out of Africa theory, you're now coming along later and saying, maybe not. And I have to wonder, I mean, because, for a lot of African Americans in particular, that sense of identity of, this is where my ancestors came from, this is ultimately where the human ancestors came from, is something of a sense of cultural pride, because it's, you needed, coming from a history here where you had 400 years of slavery, there's something sort of empowering about that, empowering about everyone here saying, yes, we recognize that genetically you are like the most original closest to the original, Homo erectus humans that existed, and that's something to be proud of, And it sounds a little bit like you're taking that away. So I'm sure you've heard some.
Out.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I've got to say here. I mean, my family are on my mother's side. Are basically from African slaves. So I mean, I have a Trinidadian passport. I'm half Trinidadian, half English. So on my mother's side, my grandmother, was pure African. So I mean, there was a sort of personal sense in this about that. That was something that I did think about, and I thought, in a way, it's a sort of, a bit of a shame that is taken away from Africans. So I mean, that was something I was quite conscious of. And another, a friend of mine who's an academic who looked at the work, and he's very sensitive to sort of cultural issues. He does a lot of political work in the US and stuff. He was like, before he even read it, he said, like, is this a book that can be used in any way, in a sort of, negative or racist agenda way?
Like appropriated by some racist,
Yeah, by sort of the far right or something, and he was very concerned that could it be used in some negative way? And like, when he looked at it, and you can see that no, I mean, the bottom line is, I still deal with some of the deep ancestry of Africans in there, but the replacement, if you like, of the deepest ancestry is from one black group to another black group. So I mean, in terms of how it can be misused is very difficult. Obviously, there still remains that issue. Yes, I mean, for us of the African lineage, we lose that, the pole position place of being the earliest, but. Yeah, I'm not sure to what degree. I mean, apart from a sense of pride in that, I don't see any real world impact in that change, to be honest. Nothing that's, I could say, obviously could be taken away from people other than, like you say, a sense of pride, perhaps. And that, I think the truth has to outweigh just things that are, sense of pride. I don't see it being able to be used in a, a way to attack people, put it that way. And obviously that
it's certainly not Anglocentric, because it's not saying that white people are the beginning and the end. So
no. So it doesn't do anything to that kind of far right argument, as that we are the whites are the first people, and that we can somehow use that. So I mean, no, and certainly I know that. Yeah, that would have been a concern, and as I say, my ancestry is, a mixed African European ancestry, so I'm quite sort of aware of those issues and sensitive to them. And I was careful in the book to, do a last look over to see if there was anything in there that could be sort of misused, or if I'd put anything in a way where it would, prompt anyone to use it for nefarious arguments. And I don't think it does. I mean, we can go into it a bit later, obviously, but I do still recognise the depth, as I say, of the African ancestry there. It's still, in my view, the second oldest lineage in the world. So, I mean, it's not. Even then, there's some complexity there, because when we talk about like African lineage and the oldest people, what they're talking about is sub-Saharan Africans, which is a very small group of Africans. And there's. I think that usually gets lost in translation to the public, but we're not really talking about Negroid people, right? We're talking about the sub-Saharan Africans, who are a small sort of subset of Africans that are quite genetically different from most of the other African groups. So even that's a little bit, there's a little bit more to this idea that Africans are the oldest, because you could almost say that's a false sense of pride, because from what I can see, that the Negroid Africans, who would be as far as I know, my ancestors as well, are a younger race. That really the two elder races here are these sub-Saharan Africans and the Australasians, these Australasian Aboriginals, and the what we call Caucasoids, Mongoloids and Negroids are all relatively recent. You're dealing with sort of last 12,000 years or so. So yeah, it's a bit of a misnomer to say that Africans are the oldest. It's one small group of Africans.
Yeah. I know this is a lot of work to do this research. I know you and Danny have worked together, your wife have worked together before, but I know you now also have children that you're taking care of. So was she able to help you with this and along your path of research?
With this one, she has a strong interest in genetics and stuff, but more to do with horses, because you probably know that she's bit of a horse enthusiast. So, but she's sort of thought it's funny that I've ended up sort of quite involved in looking at genetics, which was, one of her sort of passions, being respect to horses. But no, so she didn't read too much on this one. This is more my baby, I'd say.
Right.
Obviously, she supports me in it, and there's times when I wouldn't be able to get things done without her helping me or looking after our son. So it's difficult to do this kind of work. When you got a 3-year-old pulling on you, telling you to build some blocks. So yeah, and it's intensive, and it is difficult because there's moments when you're trying to process some really heavy information, and any distraction, from that is like your brain feels like it's frying, because you're trying to deal with something really complex and what's going on around you. And it is difficult. You kind of need to be able to hide away sometimes to do this, this kind of research.
But you must have had some good support. Yeah, you must have had some good support for this.
Yeah, you do need to be able to sometimes just be able to sit quietly away, and be left to get on with it. Otherwise, it's virtually impossible.
I didn't mean, true, right? I didn't mean that way. I meant like outside, like academic and friends as well. There must have been
I've had
people there
to
give you their
As I say, I had a friend, an academic friend who read over the manuscript at the end there and gave his opinion, and checked whether there was anything sort of sensitive in there, and he was very pleased with it, and actually he called it brilliant, which was more than I expected, and so I've had that, and I did have some brief contact with one of the leading scientists in the multi-regional theory camp. Only brief, couple exchanges. He sent me some papers. Unfortunately, he didn't have time to read it all. Which is a shame. I did exchange an email with one of the top British researchers as well in the out of Africa field, which is the name has gone, but he's got a book called Soul Survivor, which is about us being the last of the hominin family, and he works in the British Museum. The name will probably come back to me. Professor Stringer, who was very polite, but again, he just didn't have time to read it. The problem is getting some of these scientists to actually find the time to read, the manuscript is really, really, really hard. So at the moment, actually, I'm looking for academics and authors to read it over and endorse the work, and that's difficult because a lot of people just feel they don't have time, or I'm not an academic, I'm not writing from another university, so obviously that closes some doors immediately as well. And like people say, why don't you just get these academics to look at your theory, or why don't you write a paper? And and I've had quite a few people say that, but you've got to be sort of realistic. A lot of these academics, they're very busy. They have their own books they're working on. They're giving talks. They're looking at papers. They're lecturing. They get an email from an unknown person saying, "Can you read my manuscript and endorse it?" It's like, why? I'm so busy. I really haven't got time for you. So it's not so easy to get your foot in the door and say, "Yeah, come have a look at my new theory." And you say, "Write a paper." Write a paper. Anyone can write a paper. Yes, anyone can write a paper. But let's be honest, nature and science are not going to accept a paper from an unknown person with no PhD, not a relevant degree in that subject area. I'm not an archaeologist or a paleoanthropologist. And who's not writing from a university. So I'm a realist. I know that door is not open for me. So I have to start with the public and some of the academics who perhaps are not so well known, who are willing to at least endorse the work, and to then maybe move on towards being able to prepare a paper. But I have to work around the opposite way in a way, because I'm not a noted academic lecturing at UCLA or something. It's different.
Yeah, I think you're right. And using the media to get your message out, and eventually book sales. If you sell enough books, then it's going to get their attention. And
that's right.
Some academics will end up just reading it because they're going to feel the need to either understand it so they can defend their own theory, or maybe hopefully you'll find some people that are actually open-minded. And like other fields, I wouldn't be surprised if there are some that are quietly entertaining the same theory, but just are not brave enough to come out with it because they won't have the backing of the university or institution they're working for.
That's right, and they can lose prospective teaching roles, or maybe lose, an academic grant for a project. They're in a more vulnerable position than I am in that respect. That I can pretty much say whatever I like. The only difference would be whether or not members of the public would then like what I say or think it's valid, but it wouldn't really sort of lose me a job or cause me problems where I'm working, etc. So, I mean, I can understand that there's going to be some academics that, must suspect at least some aspects of what I've written. But not quite brave enough to turn around and say, that's what's going on. I mean, I've seen academics that have said things which certainly lean towards conclusions that I've written about, and I think that some of them are creeping towards saying, look, hang on a minute, we've got this or this or this wrong. I've seen, there's one leading geneticist I watched a talk recently. I think it's with the Max Planck Institute, and he was talking about a study they did in Australia. They did the largest coverage genome study of Aboriginal Australians that had been done so far, and that'd thrown up quite a few anomalies, and he was kind of looking very uncomfortable, in the video, and sort of saying, oh well, we don't really know, why this is like that or this is like that. And it's, whereas, I can see they're sort of, they're falling, they're hitting that wall, if you like, with their own data, but, they're not quite at that bit where it clicks, or they're willing to admit, hang on, the fundamental out of Africa itself is the problem. It's not that, the edge part with the data we're looking at is an issue. It's we're trying to fit it into something that is wrong. And that's going to be the tricky part.
Right. So it's not the dating or like the science of the study itself. It's the study, not the science.
Yeah. I mean, put it this way. I mean, I suppose if I take you back to the sort of the beginning, I guess, of the book, which I suppose is fair, is that, we've got, there's a number of problems. I mean, I can go through, I suppose, we can do a bit of a timeline if you want, and go back to sort of the beginning. If we go right back to the beginning of human history, one of the first anomalies that's thrown up when you look at it is this idea that 5 million years ago there was this mysterious ancestor of all humans and of living primates, chimpanzees, that supposedly had these couple of different daughters. One is the mother of all humans, one is the mother of all chimpanzees, and that it's often been it's always been taught to us that this is like a arboreal ape, that's swinging through the trees, basically looks like a chimp, and that is our ancestor. And that's kind of been taught, as almost like as a fact, that. You look at some of the academics there. There was a couple. I was looking at a video, and one of these leading anatomists was saying that basically that when you really look at the way that like chimpanzees move and stuff, that it's quite unusual. Locomotion for a quadrupedic animal. That if you look at a cow or a horse or something, and then you look at the way chimps move, so like running on like knuckle walking, that's quite like an odd way of walking. Like if you really are a quadrupedic animal, they said in many respects they look more like a bipedal animal, has gradually evolved and changed the way it moves, and has changed, rather than this idea that we must have all come from, a tree swinging ape. That in fact, it's equally probable that we both descend from an original human-like ancestor. Well, that's even on its own, that's pretty shocking, because that's not something we were all taught at school, that was any possibility of that at all, But these are like, leading academics that are kind of now beginning to speculate into what would have once been seen as like absolute nonsense, to have said, well, maybe we had a human-like ancestor. Oh, well, you one of these kind of crazed conspiracy theorists or something, talking about ancient humans, but it's like, well, hang on a minute, no, that's actually a reasonable position now for them to say. So you can see there's a bit of a change in the weather there, that even like fundamentals like that are coming up for a bit of debate. Now, I'm not going to say that that's a widely accepted idea, but these are noted leading academics that are willing to speculate on that, and that when you move forward a bit, there's also some other radical changes that are going on in what we call the deepest part of prehistory. Because until recently, we thought that the first signs of Homo, the genus Homo, basically any I suppose our true predecessors, that they really appear in the fossil record around about 2.5 million years ago. That was understood until quite recently. There was the identification of the first Homo was based on tool use. which is supposed to be a fundamental sign of, higher thinking, is that, we start to cut meat and make stone tools. And what they found actually is in near Lake Turkana in Africa, they found that there's evidence of tool use going back to 3.3 million years ago, right? And that's into the era of Australopithecus. And Australopithecus is obviously, he's not, at the moment, is not included within the genus Homo. But, I say, well, it should be, if we're going to talk about, that's one of the fundamentals to recognize an early Homo, then we have to rethink Australopithecus. We can't say that, what is it that, it's not an Australopithecus then, is it? Because if we say that, was it Homo habilis, handyman, was the first identified Homo at 2.5 million, identified purely based on a loose association with some stone tools. And we're not even sure if they were used by that particular Homo anymore. But now we have, this definitive, 3.3 million year old tool use. Well, I say Australopithecus is no longer Australopithecus. In the book, I say we should be calling this Homo Australopithecus. And then we need to, even from the very early part, we need to start rethinking this timeline. And extraordinarily enough, if you go across to India, you'll find that there's a fairly recent discovery there of almost identical levels of evidence for tool use in India at around 2.8 million years ago. So there's something really going on in this period, not just in Africa, but also outside of Africa. So we're seeing that, tool use, which in India, which until recently would have been the oldest tool use in the world. I mean, if not for this other find at Lake Turkana, we would have to be talking about really out of India and stuff. So, I mean, there's a lot going on, and there's a lot of radical shifts going on, which are not easily swept under the carpet. I mean, they're quiet at the moment, because obviously you could say, a bit of a specialist. I'm looking at this as a special project. So I'm aware of these things, but they're gradually going to come to the forefront. I mean, there's some real, anomalies even from that early on in this story, like way before we get to the matter of me sort of displacing, out of Africa. I mean, it's, the Guinea, it's not even clear now whether we start this story in Africa, quite frankly, or if we start it as free-dwelling apes. These things are no longer clear.
Well, I mean, I think now that the lines have been more blurred than, let's say, 40 years ago. I think now that scientists are actually generally more open-minded about our evolution because, not that they doubt evolution itself, but because they've recognized so many new species, that are in the human family and human lineage, then maybe it's easier now for you to get this message across than, let's say, 20 years ago.
Sure.
But you're mentioning the tool use, and I wonder, what's that line that you cross between higher intelligent tool use or a raven using a twig to get something, or because we see it in apes as well, using very basic tool use.
That's right. And I mean, I've seen at least one chap who sort of pointed out that he's not convinced that that we can be so certain that all of this early tool use is really Homo, rather than
intelligence, right?
some sort of apes basically, just that happen to be using these tools. So I mean, whether or not that will, how strong that evidence is, I mean, I guess it depends on when we contrast the type of tools used by apes and the marks on bones. If they leave any, then I suppose that's for those, those particular academics to have a look and say, can we contrast this and be sure? But I guess there has to be a little bit of caution there, and saying that wherever we find tools, that these must be early humans, because that's it's not necessarily true, and that we should be a bit cautious and say that, well, at what point do we say that these tools are complex enough that we're dealing with, a different level of thinking, rather than just that animal nature of, I'm banging a stone on something and it's breaking, that's great, rather than, I'm modifying rocks and making blades and, there's definitely a difference there between simply tool use and, modifying and making advanced tools.
All right, well, let's hold it right there, Bruce. We're going to go to our first break. It'll be very quick. This is Paranormal Now. I'm your host, Alan B. Smith. I'm with author Bruce Fenton, and we are challenging the out of Africa theory and out of Australia instead. Hang in one moment and we'll be right back.
You didn't forget what's coming up tonight, did you? Hi, Inception Radio Network listeners. This is Amanda. Never miss that interview you were looking forward to or the show on your favorite topic. Follow IRN on Twitter, I_R_N, and get reminders about the evening's live shows as well as fun and important updates throughout the week. That's I_R_N, and never miss a great show again.
And welcome back to Paranormal Now. I'm with Bruce Fenton, one person that I know who has the chutzpah to challenge the out of Africa theory, and he does it well, and he does it academically. And the name of his book is The Forgotten Exodus: The Into Africa Theory of Human Evolution. So we left it off, Bruce, talking about tool use. When you go into Australians' history, archaeological history, what kind of ancient tool use do you see there, and how far back does it date?
Well, Australia itself is problematic. That's because, until not that long ago, it was believed by the academics that humans first arrived there about 20,000 years ago. So it was seen as a really unexciting place to go looking for, ancient human evidence. You can imagine, so there was basically no interest. And then on top of that, of course, there's the cultural issues, and there was all sorts of political issues. I mean, until not that long ago at all, the Australian Aboriginals were considered flora and fauna, and were no different from kangaroos and koalas in terms of the law. So there's all kinds of issues in Australia that prevented real, anthropological and archaeological work from happening. So there is a lack in the record there, and now there are a few projects are going on, and people are seeing some of these big headlines coming out, like oldest stone house in the region found 10,000-year-old stone house in northern Australia, and then another study comes out and says we found 50,000-year-old remnants on an island, I think it's the other week, and so on, and they're coming out with all these big revolutionary studies now. But the problem is, until recently, there wasn't a lot going on. So, I mean, there's a real lack. What we have there is, like I say, we've got finds that go back, 50,000 years. Those ones they're okay. They're within the acceptable, framework. The trouble is that if you look at a map of the basically before the Ice Age ended and we had the rising of sea levels, what is now Australia was the Sahul Plate, and it was enormous. I mean, it's lost about a third of its landmass to the sea. And then to the northwest, you had the Sunda Plate, which has lost, again, an enormous amount of land. And the trouble is, early humans tend to be ocean hugging, right? So all of your primary sites for the oldest inhabitation of these two, land masses are like deep under the sea because of this 100-meter, sea level rise. So even though they are looking now, you've got that problem. And then second to that is that you have a vast interior deserts where there may well be, remains. And then the third problem is a distrust between the Aboriginal people and like the white academics. So although in some cases there's little doubt that the Aboriginal people know where there's ancient sites, they're not exactly keen to go and tell someone's going to dig them up, especially a group that they may consider to be, hostile to them, or, consider there's been a history with them. So it's a very different situation to say in Africa or in Europe or even in Asia, that, you've got some real problems there. I mean, I've seen people have sent me pictures of collections of stone artifacts that they've found at various sites around Australia that have not been studied, and some that have, had academics come and look and have dismissed them because they say, well, they're not Aboriginal and therefore they are not even tools. It's almost like if they don't fit the framework, they don't even exist, kind of thing. They must be natural, rather than saying that perhaps there's cultures that go back, earlier than our understanding, and these stone tools may be even more ancient. I mean, we've got, fossil evidence at the moment only goes back to about 42,000 years, which is, they've got Mungo Man. So again, that's why in many respects you have to look at other evidence, and this is why I ended up going. Well, I went back to Africa, and I also went back to 5 million years ago and worked my way around the world, and worked, from there into Eurasia, in the Caucasus, where you've got, Homo erectus at 1.8 million years, Southeast Asia, you've got Homo erectus around similar, about 2 million, perhaps. And then up in Europe, I looked at all the Neanderthal ancestry, and everywhere I looked, I looked to see the evidence there of Homo sapiens and Homo sapiens ancestors. So in a way, you have to. It's like a detective process. That if you don't have the smorgasbord of evidence, showing where the killer was and what room they were in and what weapon they had, then you have to go through that process of logical deduction and narrowing down your suspects. And that's the way I had to work, because it's not so clear as you can just say, well, I've got like a 1,000,000-year-old skull in Australia with a 1,000,000-year-old axe, which would have been like would have made my job pretty easy. Unfortunately, yeah, it's not like that. You really have to work through everywhere to come down to this sort of final conclusion. I'll give you a few examples of why that is. I mean, if you look at, there's been two really crucial studies in Europe. One of them was I think it's the Indiana University comparative fossil study, where they looked at fossils of hominins all across Europe, particularly teeth and jaws were their focus. And what they wanted to find was evidence of Homo sapiens ancestry among these fossils. And so that was, from the outset, the goal of that study. And what they eventually found was all of these fossils were representative of ancestors of Neanderthals, and Neanderthals only. And there was no sign of archaic Homo sapiens anywhere across Europe. Now that's a problem, because Homo heidelbergensis, who's in Europe, is supposedly the ancestor of Homo sapiens in Africa. That there's mutual populations. The same as you had Homo erectus in Europe, Homo erectus in Africa. You've got Homo heidelbergensis, both in Africa and Europe. So when you say that you've got none there, then you have to infer there's none there as well. And so that was a big problem. And then you had a second study, which is the analysis of DNA from a Spanish side called Cima de los Huesos, which is like the pit of bones. And they had their 500,000-year-old remains of these beings that they thought were a unique species, the Cima hominins. After doing basically mitochondrial and nuclear DNA extraction and analysis, they came to the conclusion that, in fact, these were ancestral to Neanderthals as well, and were something on the lines of a Homo heidelbergensis. Sorry. And that because of how old they were and how far along they were in that sort of what they call the morphological changes, with the change of the physical features, the skull shape and all these, aspects they have to look at. They said that, it was quite clear it was well on its way to being a Neanderthal, which pushed back the timeline for this split between Homo sapiens and Homo neanderthalensis back to at least, they think, round about, say, 600 to 800,000 years, right, which was a massive pushback from about before. They thought maybe about 400,000, So they had to move that back hundreds of thousands of years. And in the other Indiana University study, they actually said that they felt the split was as early as 1 million years ago. Right, and so this is a big problem. This is a really big problem. So you've wiped off the board all of the contenders in Europe and Africa for the immediate predecessor of Homo sapiens. There's just no sign of him anywhere in those two continents, right? And you've pushed back the dating massively. So okay, where do you look then? So it is problematic, and we have a fairly good fossil record in Africa, because that's where the focus of study has been, and yet we do not find that ancestor there, and the DNA is telling us we need to look way further back than we thought. So these really were crucial findings for me, because then they get you to to be able to at least take out some of the areas and the contenders, and it means the academics have to face that as well. And some of the out of Africa are saying, well, really, this is like the whole apple cart has been, knocked over, because, all of these models have been based on Homo heidelbergensis being our immediate ancestor. And like now we know that that's not true, that it's basically an early Neanderthal.
Yeah. How does that work? I mean, I'm trying to imagine, the past, and you have these different species of human or Homo erectus, and they evolved separately and apart from each other, and yet they are able to interbreed. So how does that even happen? Because we know how humans are, right? We migrate from here to there. We explore different areas, and so how there's such clean, distinct genetic lines of these different species of humans, and then it was like later that they sort of mated. I mean, doesn't that seem odd? I mean, you put like,
it is problematic, yes. And I don't, the definition of species, as we would have learned it at school, was that types of animals that can't interbreed successfully. I mean, that was the fundamental definition of species. I mean, now some of the academics have come about the idea that we need to make this more of a wavy line, because we're seeing that we're seeing certain differences between, particularly in humans, that we have these different lineages that have significant adaptations to their regions and that are quite different, but yet they do interbreed and they do have kids, and the kids can have kids. So that line has been, changed. So although the general public, you'd think, a species, it means you can't interbreed. The academics are no longer generally seeing it like that. But I would argue that that we have to rethink this whole idea of that there was multiple species. I mean, certainly they're interbreeding. We know that now. And part of the Out of Africa model was that these were totally separate species that couldn't interbreed, and that Homo sapiens came in, marched in, killed all these Neanderthals, killed whoever else was there, and that was it. And there was no Neanderthal or anyone else interbreeding with us, and nothing else in the genome. Well, we know that's rubbish now, because we know that nearly everyone, every non-African person pretty much has around 2 to 3% Neanderthal DNA. So obviously there was interbreeding into a significant amount. So that's one area that's had to change. And we have to rethink this idea of what is a separate species. Indeed, if you look back now, you see, if you look at the family tree, obviously you've got all these different Australopithecus, got these different Homos on there. A lot of those, I say, have to go for a start, because if you refer to some work that was done over in Georgia, one of my favorite countries, as I've been to Georgia, up in the mountains there was a site called is it the Dmanisi site, where they found 5 Homo erectus skulls. And the problem with that is that they were very early, 1.8 million years old. You only see Homo erectus in Africa around 1.92 million years ago. So again, there's an issue there. They never expected to find Homo erectus so early up in the mountains in Georgia. But the second problem with that was that they found amongst these 5 skulls so much like morphological diversity, so many differences in the skull, that it called into question the identity of a number of named human species in Africa. And that what the lead researcher came to the conclusion of is basically that we need to rethink and say that from about 2.5 million years ago, up until, at least in some areas, up until around maybe a million years ago, that we're really talking about Homo erectus. We're not talking about this species and that species. He'd wipe off Homo habilis for a start, and more than one other species that should go, because what we're actually seeing is instead, like today, if I go to like Tibet and I take someone from Tibet and I go, down into the Amazon, take one of these tribesmen, and I go and grab like a Maasai warrior and I stand them in a line, they look pretty different. They look really different, aren't they? And so if you find their bones buried somewhere, it's very tempting to say, I found 3 different species of humans. And that has been what's happening. And like now they're starting to realize that there was, in fact, this diversity among the population of Homo erectus that we see today among Homo sapiens. And that, so we really have to start thinking differently, and that probably, and I suggest in the book, probably we should just think of almost a single lineage, that we have these Homo Australopithecus, the first sort of tool users, and that eventually around about 2.5 million years ago, they're becoming Homo erectus, early Homo erectus, and Homo erectus goes on to be the progenitor of Homo sapiens, and that amongst the Homo sapiens group is Homo sapiens sapiens, which is us, Homo sapiens neanderthalensis, obviously Neanderthals, and Homo sapiens denisova, which is Denisovans, and others. But we should be thinking of these as Homo sapiens, and that we share that Homo erectus ancestry. We have significant differences, but we are all Homo sapiens, and we are interbreeding, and we can have fertile children.
And as far as intelligence goes, I mean, we're learning more about the Neanderthals, and we're finding that they have cultural artifacts, to reflect that they have that they're not just cutting up tools for killing and shaping leather to clothe themselves. I mean, they had imagination, and I just wonder, as we find out that they're more intelligent than we had previously thought, they're just sort of like, a dumb human. Now I wonder, how is it that they were just completely wiped out?
Yeah, I mean, I do tackle that because, I mean, again, there's been this kind of prejudice in thinking that, we must have been the best, that we had the big brain and, we stormed into Europe and, humans are here now, get out the
Everybody
way.
Get out.
It's this kind of idea that we were just this rolling train of greatness, that just pushed all these idiots out of the way, and that, for a long time has been pretty much the story that's been taught to us, in a roundabout way, that these other sort of stupid, poorly adapted hominins, just couldn't deal with us and that we won the day. And I don't believe that's true at all. And I think that, as you say, that the evidence coming out to show that these were intelligent people like us that had clothes, art, probably language. They were drawing and, they were doing pretty much everything we do, making weapons and stuff. In some areas, certainly would have been, more adapted to certain skills or whatever. There's going to be some advantages here and there, but I think that, for example, Neanderthals, certainly the European Neanderthals, were better adapted to the cold, harsh climate of Europe than we were and stuff. So, everyone's got their own, key areas and advantages. But I don't believe that we swept in and our big brain won the day. I think that, we're talking about, different kinds of Homo sapiens. We're all big brained. We were all able to do pretty much the same things. We were similar enough that we were into breeding and all the rest of it. So that idea should go out the window. What I see instead is that most of human history, going back to hominin history, really has been a flow of catastrophic events, like mega disasters that I think really have shaped, our environment, shaped us, and in the end have chosen, who wins the day. I think it's been very little to do with how amazing we were. I think certainly in some instances it was as simple as being where we were standing when the shit hit the fan, and that's been a major part of it. And that I do come on to in in the latter part of the book. I come on to that. I mean, I can probably backtrack it a little bit, but basically there was a huge disaster down in Southeast Asia called the Lake Toba supervolcano. And that to me is the crucial event, if you like. I can take it back just very quickly before I get on to that, because it's a really interesting subject.
Sure.
But I should probably take us back to 200,000 years ago, because that's one of the sort of real crucial migration. So if I just say that, we've had the Homo erectus, up until about 1 million years ago, and then we see some sudden changes going on, really. The size of the brain starts to accelerate around about 900,000 years ago. There's a lot of adaptations in the body. We also see down in Southeast Asia, somebody is able to move between islands, because we know now, of course, the Hobbit or Homo floresiensis is on Flores, which is an island which was always separated from other land masses around it. So somebody is able to move around over water, which is a fundamental change. Up until then, we didn't believe that humans could sail, supposedly not until about 50,000 years ago. Now we're looking at somebody 1 million years ago sailing around in Southeast Asia. And this, whoever they were, these people are crossing what is called it's a fundamental geographic divide down there, which is called the Wallace Line. Basically, there's some very strong currents move through that area, and that somebody, they've managed to get across. Flores is on the wrong side of the Wallace Line. We also know that on Sulawesi nearby, that there seems to be tools that could well be as old as the remnants on Flores, and all these areas, put you in easy shot of Australia, right? So around 1 million years ago, there is literally no reason to think that these same people wouldn't be on Australia, right? And that's where really we sort of move across onto that continent. And then over the next few 100,000 years, we've got ongoing change. They say around 800,000 years ago, we know that's when these splits begin. We have the Denisovans, the Neanderthals, and the Sapiens. We're all diverging around then. That's been shown in a number of studies now. We've also seen that in analysis of Denisovan DNA. That's 800,000 years ago, approximately, is when we diverged from them. So a lot's happening at that point. For a while, my interest goes, because I don't know, obviously, every single thing happened those 100,000. The next point of interest for us is about 200,000 years ago. And that's because we know at that point there is a climatic disaster. Something really awful is going on. There's droughts, there's all sorts of problems. Human populations are being reduced significantly. And then we have the first migration into Africa. Because if we look at the evidence, the earliest signs of Homo sapiens in Africa appear around about 190,000 years ago, possibly 160,000 years ago, because those earliest skulls have been questioned by some academics who say they think that they've fallen down into a lower level in the soil. But either way, around that time, just after 200,000, maybe a bit more, that we have the first signs of Homo sapiens, and that's in East Africa, in Ethiopia. And one of the interesting things about that is if you look on a map, if anyone pulls up a map of Africa, big place, big old place, Africa, and you look where those skulls are found. You look at the Homo and Herto skull sites. What you find is that they are both, right, in East Africa, in Ethiopia, very close to an entry points into the continent. There's an area there called the Bab el Mandab Straits, which takes you basically straight into Africa from like the Middle East. So it's suspicious, because when you look straight away, when you look at that map, and if you say you're expecting Homo sapiens to be sort of all over the continent, ranging across Africa, this is their homeland, and it gets to the point where they migrate out. But yet, where do we find them? Just in East Africa, where they would have entered the continent. I mean, that straight away should be a red flag for people. Right?
Well, what about some of the earlier fossil bones found in Africa?
There's a lot of earlier
pre-human
fossil bones, but they're not Homo sapiens. That's the problem. That's to say that you have these like Homo heidelbergensis types, which we long assumed were the predecessors. But as I say, those have been wiped out of the question now because of these studies in Europe. So all of those other hominins have been basically just relegated to not contenders. So this is the problem. So now what we see is just those two sites, Homo and Herto in Ethiopia, as the only evidence of Homo sapiens on the continent ever, until 200,000 years ago. So that's problematic. I mean, considering we're supposed to be there, evolving there, ranging across the terrain, and getting to a point where we've expanded so much that we've had to migrate out, and like all you're finding is two skull sites, in East Africa near an entrance point. So that itself is a problem now. But then the problems continue to worsen, because then you have, of course, I'd expect these Homo sapiens to interbreed with any local hominins. I mean, there probably was some interbreeding between Homo sapiens and Homo heidelbergensis and and Homo erectus that was still present there. And I'm sure that all that was going on after this, what would have been a very small group of Homo sapiens arrived there, because I said there's been a disaster. The number of humans, of Homo sapiens was very low anyway. There's some evidence to suggest that there's a missing group of humans in the Australasian genome, and I believe that that's this group, that a group split off and they left and went to Africa. Of course, in the Outer Africa theory, they like to say that they think there was a group who came into Australia and then died off. But because you can always read these things two ways, is when you put it all together, you can only see the picture. So basically then, after that, 70,000 years ago, you have this other climatic disaster, and this is the Lake Toba supervolcano, which is it's just a incredible event. You've got in the middle of this Sunda plate, which is prime real estate, because consider that you're in the you're in the pits of the ice age, so really you want to be around the equator, so because of course everywhere else is hard going, all along that area through Indonesia and obviously through equatorial Africa, and technically also through obviously parts of like Central America. You've got like a warm belt, so humans are really, and most animals are naturally going to be heading to that warm belt. The problem is, of course, is that Sunda, right on that warm belt, has this massive volcano sitting right in the middle of it, and it just by bad luck, the damn thing explodes, and it blows the most horrendous amounts of ash and lava. It's I'm just going to pull up a couple of numbers for you here, because I've got it in front of me. Let's see, it's a colossal figure. 800 kilometers cubed of ash for a start. Wow. Imagine that, 800 cubic kilometers of ash. The volcano erupted for 14 days. They think that there was 640. the largest eruption of the last 2.5 million years. 2,800 cubic kilometers of magma coming out of it. Obviously, pyroclastic flows, searing gas, megaquakes, resultant tsunamis. I mean, when you start imagining that, and just those colossal volumes of ash and lava.
Yeah.
I mean, and that this is in the middle of where people would be living. This is literally prime real estate. This is catastrophic. It's a really catastrophic event. And for a long time, scientists had theorized that this had caused a near extinction of the human race. I mean, because we see that there's what they call like a signature in the genome to say that there's been a mass die-off of humans around that time. But that's changed recently. There'd been some new research was done. They were looking in Africa, and they found that the effects of Lake Toba on Africa were not that severe. Basically, if you look at equatorial Africa downwards, it was pretty unaffected. The ash cloud from Toba rolled mostly to the northwest, and so it gradually obviously spread across Asia, through Central Asia, and then went around the world until it covered the whole of the northern hemisphere. Northern hemisphere was in big trouble. It was like a nuclear winter. But if you were in Australia or if you were in southern Africa, you weren't really that affected. Yeah. So what we have happened here, and this is we go back to what you said earlier about why these other groups died off. In my model, I'm very convinced that the largest population in Sunda were Denisovans, and that to their just to their sort of north and to their west there was Neanderthals. Neanderthals controlled most of Eurasia, but they had Europe right across to parts of China, and then all of Southeast Asia and down into Indonesia was Denisovan Heartland, and that what we think of as Homo sapiens, if you like, or our ancestors were more down in Australia, and that so we had our own, everyone had their own major territories. There would have been some mixing and interbreeding and all the rest of it, but when the event happened, by sheer luck, we were standing on the right ground. The Denisovans were annihilated, absolutely obliterated in this event. Neanderthals were pushed back to their outer regions in Europe, because let's be honest, nobody really wants to live in freezing cold territory. And people say, "Oh, Neanderthals, they like to live in the cold." It's like, I don't think they like to live in the cold.
It's like a preference.
Right. Yeah, like, let me think. Where do I want to be in? Like this Garden of Eden like place down in Sunda with picking fruit off the trees, or in Ice Age, like Northern Europe with like saber-toothed tigers and giant cave bears attacking me. I mean, it's a no-brainer, isn't it? That if you can be down there, you're down there. That some people have been pushed to the fringes, and so they're out in these wilds, and they've specialized over time. But it doesn't mean that was where they really wanted to be. That's where they've ended up. They've been pushed
originally,
out. But those were the survivors.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can see how it's just logical, and that these people though, again, they're standing on the right territory. So the European Neanderthals, they weathered the storm. They basically, their population center has been obliterated as well. Because East Asia and Central Asia, where they had larger populations, and we know this because when they look at the genome of Neanderthals, they find.
Wait, Bruce. Actually, let's just hold it right there. We have one quick break coming up here. You're listening to Paranormal Now, and we'll be right back. Stay tuned. And welcome back to Paranormal Now. If you want to find out more about the show and about this particular episode, you can go to Paranormal Now Radio on Facebook or at Paranormal Now on Instagram. And of course, I'm on Twitter as well, but I tend to be on Instagram and Facebook quite more often. So our guest tonight is Bruce Fenton, author of The Forgotten Exodus. And if you want to find out more about Bruce, just go to brucefenton.info, right, Bruce? I think that's pretty simple.
Yep, that's it. Yep.
Yeah, and if they want to find out more about the book and how to purchase it, where to get it, where should they go?
Yeah, on the same website, they'll find a link there at the top. They can click on Into Africa, and on that page, there's details about the book, and there's options to go to Amazon or to Smashwords for people that don't like Amazon or haven't got a credit card. So yeah, they'll be able to get it there.
Yeah, and actually, you had Graham Hancock do the foreword for the book. How did that work out?
Well, basically, I mean, I've had some limited contact with him over the years. You know, we've met briefly a couple of times. I can't say that, oh yeah, he's a good close friend or anything, but we'd had some contact. So I sent him an email inquiring whether or not he would be willing to, have a look at the manuscript, and that if he was interested enough to possibly, write a foreword for it. So I didn't hold out huge hopes because he's a very busy man, and doesn't owe me any favors or anything. So. But he agreed. Yeah, he said like if it was what I was saying it was, that he would be happy to have a look through and in potential write a foreword for it. So I sent it across. He managed to get the time to read it, and was obviously really impressed with the research I'd done, impressed enough that he was willing to do that, and wrote what I consider quite a glowing foreword to it, really. As he says, it has the potential, though it may not be realised, but the potential to change our understanding of prehistory. So it's really been awesome having him do that, and also share the book on his social media, on his Twitter, on his Facebook. So and obviously it says a lot that someone like that is willing to sort of stand behind my theory and put their name on it, because the same he sold 8 million books. I think I can safely say that my figures are more in the hundreds than his are in the millions. So he's really not someone who has anything to gain, by putting his name to my work.
Hopefully yours will soon be in the hundreds of thousands. So we'll see.
It'd be nice, yes. I mean, it's certainly fun for the research. But I mean, that's been a huge help, and highly appreciated. And it's obviously it opens up doors to all the people that read his books, who will hopefully take an interest more in my work. And I'm also going to be author of the month on his website for all of June.
Oh, nice, dude. Nice.
So people can pop in and they'll be able to talk to me on the forums at grahamhancock.com. And there'll be an article there which will start off the debate, which I've provided to them. And obviously, people have listened to your show, and there's, the interviews out there. So hopefully they can find a bit of information enough, certainly, even if they haven't read the book, to come in and ask me questions and, discuss the subject.
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly parallels in your work because, one, he's talking about, in much of his work, the human species having, civilizations much earlier than previously presumed. And then you, of course, are saying that there's this earlier, what's the word, migration?
I do with the earlier migrations, and
and is there any connection between the two works, or just would that be the only parallel, really?
Well, no, actually, if anyone's read Magicians of the Gods, they'll know that in one of the last couple of chapters, he actually does talk about human evolution and some of the issues that have been coming up in the data in the last few years, and he goes a bit into that. And funnily enough, I didn't know that when he read my manuscript, but I have since read all of Magicians, and so he there's a chapter where he does go into this a little bit. So it's funny. So obviously it had been on his mind, and he had noticed that there was some anomalies coming out in the evidence, from the mainstream, and he was questioning as well, saying that have we really got the whole story about this hominin evolution, or is it perhaps not as solid as we thought? So he hadn't gone quite as far as me. Obviously he was a side within his greater narrative, but he obviously had that in his head that there was something wrong with the story. And I think that's why he was interested. Like now I can see that in hindsight. That's why he was interested.
All right. And so for anyone who's tuning in for the live stream of this podcast, we were just talking about some of the devastating natural events that would actually could have, I think you're saying this, either wiped out or nearly wiped out the Denisovans or other species. So do you want to continue with that line of thought?
Sure. Yeah. So I was just saying, that the Neanderthals, we now know that there was greater genetic diversity among Neanderthals in Central and Eastern Asia than there was in Neanderthals in Europe. Now that's something really people have to take on board, because we all grew up with the understanding that Neanderthals were European. That Europe was the Neanderthal territory. They were the masters of Europe. Like, now you have to rethink that and say, well, hang on a minute. If they had greater genetic diversity in Central and Eastern Asia, that's where their homelands were. We're talking about these ones in Europe, but just the fringes of a bigger population, right? So what happened to that bigger population? Why did they disappear? If these were such a hardy species and that were, and was, big brained and all the rest of it, what went wrong? Like, and we didn't just come in and roll over them because we didn't, we weren't even, supposedly we didn't go into Europe to about 35,000 years ago as well. So we're not really, we can't be held responsible because they were on the verge of extinction at that point. So something has obviously happened already. Yeah. And on top of that, you have this missing populations in East Asia. Why aren't they, why wasn't there still thousands or millions of them there? So something has happened there. We know that Toba was an enormous event. We know it had devastating effects on Asia, all across Central Asia, and it would have essentially annihilated people living there. So you can add two and two together and you can see what's happened there. The Denisovans, as I say, I believe were particularly in Southeast Asia and on the Sunda Plate, on some of these Indonesian islands. And there's another reason why I say that. Apart from the fact the Chinese have been finding some very strange fossils of late, which they suspect are Denisovans. They can't identify them because they haven't been able to extract DNA, but there's a strong suspicion that at least some of the Chinese fossils are either Denisovans or Denisovan hybrids. But where this becomes more clear is if you go down to Australasia, and particularly to what we call Guinea, between New Guinea and Papua, but that island, going back before the rise of the seas, Guinea was part of what we think of as Australia now. So this was all Australasia, a singular landmass. But there's some really peculiar things that have turned up there. First of all, we now know that Homo sapiens interbred with Denisovans, right? There's been people have seen that there's this study, mysterious, humans interbred with modern humans in Australasia, and there's been a number of articles flying around the web, as well about mysterious fourth human type discovered in Papuan DNA, and that's great. But there's been a superficial level of understanding about that in most of those articles because they've missed a lot of the key points, which I'm going to I can reveal for the people here if they're interested. What they found is that 44,000 years ago, our ancestors, if you like, modern humans in that region were interbreeding with Denisovans. Right, that's a huge problem for a start because humans, like Homo sapiens or modern humans, are not supposed to have entered Australia until 50,000 years ago for a start. Right, I don't know how you interbreed from the other side of the sea. I know for a start that's a problem, isn't it? Because as far as I understand it, you have to be pretty close, don't you, to interbreed with someone. So I don't know how
genetic evidence. The genetic evidence says that we interbreeded, but okay.
Yeah, and yet the academics are still trying to say that humans didn't enter that area until 50,000 years ago, and were totally isolated. Now, if you're totally isolated, right? How do you interbreed? So there's an anomaly there in their data, which they're scratching their heads and saying we don't really understand. And some academics are saying to others, but you're telling us that it's 50,000 and that these did 44,000 years ago when they're isolated. And even the academics are saying, well, that can't make sense. And so what we need to really is to rethink that and say that, hang on a minute. Clearly, our group, if you like, these modern humans are not isolated for a start. No matter when you put them in there, because there's Denisovans there that they're interbreeding with. So up in Guinea and in northeast Australia particularly, right? And there's a few other weird things that they found in their data. They found that there is a divide between the genetics of people in Guinea and northeastern Australia versus everyone else in Australia, which is as deep in terms of genetics, as deep as the divide between people in North American Indians and people in Siberia. That's a pretty big distance away, isn't it? So you're thinking, well, hang on, you've got the same level of difference in the genes and stuff between, obviously people in North America and in Siberia, thousands and thousands of miles apart. And yet you're seeing that same level in people that literally, if you walked across an imaginary line, they're there. Right? That doesn't make any sense. Doesn't make any sense at all, because you're saying these are modern humans. They're all living together on the same landmass, and at the time there was no sea between Guinea, and Australia. It was all one landmass. How do you explain that the guy a few meters that way is as divergent as people that live thousands and thousands of miles apart, separated by oceans? Right? Doesn't make sense, does it?
No. So
no obvious sense.
What are they? How are they trying to justify it? Or they're just not?
Well, so far they haven't, because this is really quite new. So they haven't justified. But they did say that they thought that maybe it was some kind of interbreeding taboo. And that's good thinking, because I absolutely agree with them. I think it was an interbreeding taboo. And I think it was a very easy to understand one, because the people living in the northeast were Denisovans, and the people living down on the other side were modern humans. And they said, you don't breed with those people; they're not us. And if you look at the interbreeding, if you look at the marriage rules and the breeding rules amongst Aboriginal people in Australia, like going historically and even up to today, they have got some of the most stringent rules on marriage of anyone in the whole world. Some really complex laws, and a lot of them involve getting killed if you don't follow those laws, right? So I think it's fair to say that those laws were already in place when you go back, and that you were told those people up there are different from us. We don't marry them. We don't breed with them, and that's why you see this deep divergence. Is there's an absolute taboo, but around 44,000 years ago, at least one group of modern humans mixed with these Denisovans. We don't know why. We may never know why, but for whatever, perhaps they wanted the territory. Perhaps it was an invasion. We can't say, but somebody went in there and those populations merged. And that's why we see now a signature at 44,000 years ago. And they said the funny thing is the divergence between the two modern human populations in that region is around 40,000 years or so ago, very close to the dates of the actual interbreeding. And yet they haven't clicked and put these things together because they're not understanding who these people in the northeast are. They think there's just modern humans there, right? But they can't be, because the people have got Denisovan DNA in them, and we know it's the only signature on the planet, Alan, for this interbreeding. Nowhere else on the planet, nowhere else. The only other signs of Denisovans, right, is a couple of little bone fragments in a cave in Siberia. They tested all the people. They tested the local people. No signs of Denisovan DNA in them, right? Tested the people in Europe. No signs of Denisovan DNA. You go down to Asia, you find that in East Asia, people have got about 0.1% Denisovan DNA. You get to Northeast Australia and to Guinea, and these people have got 6%, right?
Wow.
That's pretty big. That's more than we have Neanderthal or anything in Europe. There's quite a big chunk, right? So quite clearly you're moving into Denisovan territory, aren't you, in that area? Nowhere else is it like that. And they've tried to say that, well, maybe they encountered these people somewhere on the way through Southeast Asia or on an island somewhere. It's yeah, but there's no evidence for that. The only evidence that is there is that they had them there on that land with them, and they can try to spin it however they want. That's what the genetic evidence tells us, is that they were both there on that land, and that after that interbreeding happened, the other people didn't want anything to do with the other human group up there, and that they became as taboo as the Denisovans. Yeah, and that's the picture that's forming. But the academics obviously aren't ready to turn around and say that's what happened, because they're still mostly defending this there was only humans on that land for 50,000 years thing. They're still trying to defend that, even though they know that this interbreeding happened. So there's a lot of really weird inconsistencies in there, which I don't know how they're defending. It's ridiculous.
Well, without actual, much more ancient fossil evidence in Australia, I mean, do you think that people will just use that as an excuse constantly to say, well, despite all this other circumstantial evidence, it's just not even plausible?
Well, I don't know. I mean, they could try to say that, but then they're using all the same genetic data to try and prove out of Africa. So that's the problem, Alan. You can't have it both ways, So they want to be able to say that, but the genetic data, we use, to show that we think that people were migrating through the Asian coastlines down into Southeast Asia, and we see all this signature of people moving along. That's not all based on fossils and stuff. Most of the work now is being based on genomes, genomic research and stuff. So yeah, they can't really have it both ways. I mean, there's a lack of fossils, sure, and they do need to do more looking, but there's so many other bits of data there. For example, another problem they have is that they say that 70,000 years ago, roughly, 70,000 years ago, humans, modern humans come out of Africa, and then they migrate, out into Eurasia and across the world. And for a long time, that was the basic picture. Well, then they found that actually for a start, Australian people have been on their land for at least 50,000 years, which is a really long time. If you say people are just, died coming out of Africa at 70,000, that was, a problem. But then what they found is that the split between the African groups and the Aboriginals was at least 70,000 years old, right? So they're saying, well, that's pretty weird, because they've come out of Africa and boom, genetically they've become different almost immediately. And so they said, well, how can we explain this, and how they got there so early? So they said, well, maybe the people ran, almost ran, they sped along the coastlines of Asia, And then for no particular reason, they've built the world's first boat, sailed across, into Australia and populated the continent, right? Which in itself is kind of not making any sense, because aren't they supposed to be slowly populating Eurasia and stuff? What is this thing of this hurry down? And they said, well, maybe there was two groups. There was the southern group that ran along the coast, and another group that later on sort of moved out and populated, the rest of like Asia and stuff. But they looked at the genetics. They found actually there's no evidence of that. There's only evidence of a singular group, right? There's certainly no evidence of two migrations, not from Australia, not from Africa. One migration populates the world, right? No matter where you start that from. So that kills that theory. The common sense thing of that, well, if they maybe split into two, we can patch the theory up. And they found, well, actually, there's no evidence for that split. It's just one group populates. So that doesn't make any sense, because why would people then run all the way down to Australia, cross over there, and then like backtrack and start populating the empty vastness of Asia and Eurasia, right? So this is another head scratcher for them. They can't see why you do that. And the other problem you've got with that is that the paleoclimatologists, right, recently have come out with this thing saying that when you look at the climate 70,000 years ago, the Northern Africa and the Levant region, all the areas where they say that the humans came out through, was in the worst catastrophic droughts of known prehistory, right? Why are you going to go through there then? Like, think like common sense again. These are people like us.
Why
like
push through this? Yeah.
Yeah, what for? Like, you're in South Africa and it's lovely and warm, and you've got your cows and your grain and everything, whatever. And someone says, oh, let's head north into the bleak wastelands. Like, nah, let's not. Let's stay here. So they're really struggling now to get over this, because they can't see. Why would people? And the guy actually said, it would have been the worst time possible for humans to try and migrate through the Levant. Like, you're not going to, are you? And the reason for that is because of Lake Toba. That whole area, the northwest, all across, Europe, Asia, this is a hell zone. You can't just go walking into it. All the crops things have been destroyed. The animals have gone extinct. There's massive die-offs. There's poisoned water with sulfuric acid in it. This is not the time, isn't it? This is not the time you migrate out. So that's a problem as well. I
suspect that the argument of humans being the great explorers and look, we've gotten to space and all that. I think that there's some truth that we love to explore. That's part of our history.
But we're not total nuts. I mean,
back then it was there's no evidence that it was anything more than just surviving, right? So you just migrated from here to there to adapt to a new area, to find new food source.
I mean, why?
It's not. You're not doing it for fun.
No, and to get a whole population to do that, to migrate into like a hell zone, you don't do it. What makes far more sense is that the people trapped on the wrong side of Toba move along those Asian coastlines, exactly where they think the migration happened, but going the other way. Because the only way you could survive that, if you'd been cut off in the north, is you head west, and eventually you hit Africa and you hit a safe zone, right? That makes sense. The other way doesn't. The other way is you can walk into certain death, pretty much, or walk into safety. Which way are we going, east or west? And like, this is common sense thinking. You don't have to be a scientist to understand this. And so when you look at that migration, they say, yeah, these people moved along the Asian coastline. I agree. But you have to use common sense here, because Toba has destroyed Asia. These people, if you're going anywhere, you're either trying to get into Australia or you're trying to get into Africa. Because if you're trapped up in the northern hemisphere, it's a bleak nuclear winter underway 70,000 years ago, right? It hasn't recovered yet. In fact, it doesn't really recover until about 60,000 years ago, which is when I'd say the true colonization of the planet happens. 70,000 years ago, what they thought was the out of Africa is in fact another into Africa. It's the second into Africa event. And this is the survivors of Toba who move west. Some of them move along the coastlines. They go across the Bab el-Mandeb Straits. And another group, which is even more perhaps controversial, but again, well evidenced, another group make it across the sea to Madagascar and directly into South Africa. And you find them along caves along the southeast coast of South Africa, such as the, there's a few. There's the Borders River Cave. There's the, it'll go on my head now. There's about 3 or 4 caves basically down on the coast. If you go across from Madagascar, hit the coastline, you'll find there's about 3 or 4 caves, and they're the oldest known Homo sapiens cave sites in South Africa. They all just happen to be where you'd land if you were coming from on the currents from Southeast Asia via Madagascar. And we know that Madagascar in known history, about 2,000 years ago, was first populated by people that sailed on small watercraft from Indonesia because the currents carry you across. And what you find down in these caves, apart from anything else, there's a stone, like the Blombus rocks, and on them there's a crosshatch pattern, right? These have been dated to about 70,000 years old. And they're supposedly, for a long time, they thought these were the first signs of, higher thinking, of art and, that the human mind has woken up and blah, blah, blah. And they all happened down in South Africa then. What they found, actually, is in Indonesia recently, they found a shell, right? And on that shell is the same crosshatch pattern, only it's 500,000 years old. So where are you thinking that's come from then? So these people have been brought that, not only have they managed to come down from that region, they've brought that knowledge, an older knowledge with them. And if you look at these people who are associated with these cave sites, are supposed to be the ancestors of the sub-Saharan Africans, what we call the Khoisan people, the oldest Africans, right? And their culture also has some very familiar things in it. For example, one of their most venerated figures or entities is a giant serpent who helps to create the landscape. It's like where have you heard of one of those, Alan? Have you ever heard of the rainbow serpent?
Yeah.
Giant snake in Australia. Yeah, creates the landscape, right? They have shrines to a giant serpent among the Khoisan. They also have the unique click language, except it's not unique because we now know that there's at least a couple of tribes in Australia up towards that border of the where now is Guinea and northeast Australia. Mm-hmm. There's islands out in the land, basically in the sea that's formed there, where the people had a click language, right? Yeah, that's a bit of a funny coincidence. So that same oldest language supposedly of Africa is also a language that existed in Australia. That same crosshatch pattern on a rock over in South Africa, known from Indonesia. So we're finding, if you look now, you can see the routes these people have taken to escape Toba is where you find people coming into Africa. You find also that on East Africa, as the people entered, they brought in a new genetic lineage called the L3 Mitochondrial Lineage. And for a long time, people say, well, L3, it's it must have just, it's a mutation that occurred in East Africa and then spread from there. But the scientists admit it spreads west. They said there's no argument about that, right? It spreads into Africa, right? Common sense. Which are the people are going west? The people are going west. The migration is coming into Africa. L3 appears there, right? L3 is closely related, and let's go a little bit into the genetics here, because L3 is very closely related to M and N lineages, right? The M and N lineages are foundational to all people today living outside of Africa, and only M and N. Right? There's a number of L lineages which are African, right? L0, L1, L2, L4, L5, and L6, which are distinctly African lineages. L3 is an anomaly. They're not sure where it originated. They think maybe just inside East Africa, maybe just outside, but they know that it's very close related to M and N have never been in Africa. Anyone who's non-African, you are from either M or N, and that's never been in Africa. They theorize maybe that mutation happened somewhere in Asia, or they don't know, but they like to think that maybe L3 came out of Africa and then split, and M and N arose. But it doesn't fit as well as going the other way. If MN are coming out of Australia, and so is L3, and they're going towards Africa, L3 goes into Africa, the M and N lineages split off and they spread throughout Eurasia.
And they have more time to do that
all
too.
These things that fit much better,
Right.
And it's every, if you like, there's so much data when you look at it together now that's against the out of Africa theory, that it's extraordinary, because everywhere you look, you can see, hang on a minute, that fits the other way around better.
Okay, so I think that, just that one piece of evidence alone, the cross-hatching pattern that you speak of, being 500,000 years old. That's 430,000 years earlier.
Yeah.
That alone is gives you pause, does it not?
It should do, yes, because that was supposed to be, as I say, the sign of human consciousness kind of switching on. So if it switched on 500,000 years ago, then really, we should be expecting to find all kinds of crazy things out there, innit? You know what I mean? There's, at that point, anything speech, dancing, artwork, more complex tools, those things should associate with that, because that's, showing that we have, abstract thinking now. So you can sit there and start to daydream about ideas. And, so if we're at that level already 500,000 years ago, like really, we have to rethink this idea that there's nothing to look for beyond 70,000 years ago, So yeah, you're right. That alone should really make people think, well, hang on a minute, that allows for an awful lot of things to have happened in those hundreds of thousands of years, beyond just simply people banging stones tools together, or cutting up a bison. That we could have been doing all sorts of things, constructing small temple sites, or making artwork, or doing extraordinary things. They might not have all survived the ravages of time, but somewhere out there should be other things, not just one shell. So I think we have to now start looking for that evidence to say, well, what else were we doing?
Well, does that time gap allow for what you're speaking of, the L3 splitting? It gives it more time, right, for those mutations to occur naturally?
Yeah, there's a lot more. Again, if you look at what I said earlier, that the Homo sapiens lineage has been pushed back to about 800,000 years. I mean, there's time for an awful lot of things to have happened, and also for a lot of lineages to have emerged. One of the strange things about this actually is that when this happens around 800,000 years ago, we call the birth of Homo sapiens. Now, how many types of Homo sapiens, nobody really knows, but it's kind of a unique event in prehistory, because until then, if we look back, we see, okay, Homo erectus, and Homo erectus was around for a long time, well over 1 million years, trucking along. And what I call, Homo Australopithecus has done even better, has managed a couple of million years or so. These beings have remained, relatively unchanged, relatively, like a singular lineage, more or less, with, diversity among the population, but not really great splits.
Okay, Bruce, hold it right there. We're coming up to the last break. This is an enlightening conversation thus far. Stay tuned. This is Paranormal Now, and my guest is Bruce Fenton. We'll be right back. And welcome back to Paranormal Now. This is the final quarter of the show, and my guest is Bruce Fenton, author of The Forgotten Exodus. And tonight we are talking about challenging the theory of into Africa. Okay, so Bruce, if you want to pick up, I'm not challenging the theory of into Africa, challenging the theory of out of Africa. If you want to pick up where we left off coming out of the third quarter of the podcast here.
Sure, yeah. So it's just saying, that we have this these splits that occur basically around about 800,000 years ago. And in my model, I say in Australasia, that, we have the emergence of at least, a good number of separate Homo sapiens lines. We have the Denisovans, Neanderthals, Homo sapiens, and others that we know now that there are other human types in the genome. They've been detected in the Denisovan genome. They've been detected even amongst the Khoisan. There's a possible another archaic hominin in their genome, and in the people of Guinea, there's been another one along with Denisovans, another relative of Denisovans detected. So we might have already maybe 6, 7 possibly known different forms of Homo sapiens that were wandering about. I suspect there was a lot more. I don't think that we're going to by luck found fossils for or detected genes of all of the ones that were around. If there was 6 or 7, we can bet there was more like 14 or so. We're not going to have had them all yet. So something extraordinary.
Even if you just look at if you look at just monkeys and apes living now, how many varieties are there?
Yeah, that's right. It's diversified over time. More and more and more. They get more splits, more divergence, more changes. So we don't know how many there were. There may have been a very large number. One thing we do know is, in respect to the Denisovans, is that there must have been a very large population. And the reason I say that is, if you look now at the people up in Guinea, only if they detect, as I say, they found that these people have got, they've got, Neanderthal, they've got Denisovan DNA, they've got DNA from a close relative of Denisovans. But the other thing that's unusual about the people of Guinea is they have the highest concentration of languages on the whole planet on one island, right? There's hundreds of languages. Some of those languages have no relationship to each other at all, none, right? They're just on one island. Hundreds of languages. You've got to think about that for a minute. How does that normally arise, right? It's an abnormal situation, isn't it, to have a couple hundred languages or more on one island, right? Where it makes more sense is that you once had a much larger extent of land with multiple groups a large population, right? These Denisovans, who once controlled, in my model, controlled in the Indonesian area, most of Southeast Asia, and that they've been obliterated. The only survivors are the ones who've made it to Guinea, right? Because it's just below the survival zone of the fallout. So what you end up with is a snapshot. If you imagine if Europe suddenly suffered some disaster and a few people from each country fled to the UK, and suddenly you've got like 100 or 200 languages, or, from every area of Europe condensed into England. That's the kind of thing you're seeing there. That's when that makes sense, because you don't normally see hundreds of different languages on one island. Yeah. And those same people are showing that they have the highest levels of this archaic hominin DNA. So these puzzle pieces keep slotting together. That's exactly what you would expect. So there's some really interesting things I expect to come out of there. I think the more they look at the genome of the people in Guinea, the more they're going to find evidence of other human lineages, because there's an unknown number. We can only really detect them once we find, a fossil somewhere that has the DNA in it. So we're very limited. We might have fossils that are from other forms already, but it's very hard to get viable DNA for sampling because usually it's deteriorated too much. I think that as we find these fossils, particularly in frozen regions like Siberia, we're going to start finding that the people, particularly the people in Guinea, have got dozens of lineages in them. I think that there was a large number of cousins to these Denisovans, not just two. I think the number's going to keep going up. And the other thing that's going to keep going up is the number that's in all of us, because we really don't know how many lineages of humans have come back in together to make what we think of as modern humans. Now we know we've got, Neanderthal, and some people have got Denisovan, some people have got something else. We don't really know in the end, Alan. We don't know how many we have. We may be, 5% this, 7% that, 10% this, 3% this, and that I think is closer to the truth. I think as we go along, and as they detect, if we're lucky enough to find these fossils with the viable DNA, we're going to realize that we're a totally hybrid species, a total mix of all of these different lineages. Certainly those that survived, that were pushed back into survival zones, interbred again, reabsorbed, and we're what's left. I don't think there was anything that, we were, so special. I think, in fact, that there probably was no what we think of as Homo sapiens before these events. That Homo sapiens is entirely the result of this interbreeding, this reabsorption of these multiple lineages into one human form. And instead of an extinction event, we've got to sort of think of it as an absorption event. Where there was this collapse in the human population, driven by Toba, which basically encouraged pockets of survivors to move into other areas and to interbreed. We kind of swallowed up the Neanderthals and the Denisovans.
Yeah, this is just slightly off topic, but I do want to ask you, if the Russians or the Chinese successfully have reproduced a mammoth by recovering their DNA, and they're set. I know the Chinese, I'm pretty sure, are set to do that. The next few years, I think they've got the capability to do so. Is it plausible to believe that the next step might be for probably not the U.S. but some other country to try to resurrect, Neanderthal or some other ancient species of human?
Yeah, I think so. And I've seen some people arguing that it's our moral duty to do it because, they feel that we caused their extinction and therefore maybe there's a moral duty that we bring them back. And, as I say, I don't believe we caused their extinction at all. But, so there's definitely people that are keen on that idea, and I don't really see any reason why, as long as we got the viable material, that why we couldn't do it, because as we say, we know they could interbreed. They were very closely related to us. There's no particular reason why we couldn't, replace the material in an egg with Neanderthal DNA if we had the DNA, I suppose. I mean, we're getting to the point with this like CRISPR technology where we can, modify the genome anyway, So it's kind of we're getting to that point, aren't we, where the technologies and the sciences are there. Until not long ago, people thought that recovering the viable DNA even for testing of the nuclear DNA, back 500,000 years ago, whatever, wouldn't have been possible. And then they managed to do it, for as I said, the Spanish study of the Sema hominins. That was like nearly 500,000 year old DNA. They really thought the nuclear DNA would never be able to be extracted at that age. So, I mean, we're progressing really fast in this area. Yeah. So, yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if we do. I don't think we'd find that they're that different to us. And certainly, I guess a Neanderthal born of a, modern human today and raised by us, I don't think we would, beyond some physical differences, I don't think that they would have any great problem adapting,
But ethically, how would you even navigate that? I mean, because anyone who just even looks different can get easily picked on. If you are the only one of your kind on the planet Earth, I'm sure. Yeah, the freak show aspect, and I mean, how do you raise that person? Do you raise them in an isolated community of scientists that, raise them separate from the rest of the world to protect them, or do you raise them and try to integrate them normally into the schools? I mean, that's why I don't think a country like the United States would do it, but maybe some other country would.
There's probably one already in a lab somewhere, to be honest.
Well, you know what? Well, I was just reading this article too. They have a artificial womb now, so that the whole idea of this is if you have a premature born baby, that you can move the baby into the womb, and it's been successfully used apparently with lamb embryos. So it just seems to me, like you said, with CRISPR and with our advances in genetics and technology, we're only just a handful of years away from being able to actually do this.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if we do it. I mean, I think we're coming up to a crucial time in Earth history. I think that, we're standing on a sort of a precipice. Either we're going to leap forward and become a stellar, species, a class 1 civilization, etc., and, go out to the stars, or we're just going to completely mess things up and end up knocked back down to the Stone Age. So, I mean, I don't know. We're on this sort of interesting time when we're doing all sorts of things that we maybe have some good, uses, but at the same time we can see there's a lot of dark, possibilities with them. And a lot of these technologies is going to be interesting, I guess, to see how we go with them. The same as, the computer technologies and stuff. We're going to 3D worlds. Are we going to go towards that Matrix kind of world where people just live through their VR? And there's all sorts of strange. We're right on that kind of edge. How do we leap forward? I think that the genetic side obviously is a part of that. The multimedia technologies, the genetic technologies, everything really. We're in a really an intense changeover. It's going to be I think problematic. When the sort of the birth pangs of a new era. And I'm not sure if we're going to use all of these technologies in the best way. I don't know, maybe if we bring back Denisovans, maybe they do a better job. Pass it over to them.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have to wonder. I mean, if we could only assume that their intelligence in a very similar way to us. But we don't know. Yeah. I mean, maybe there's something about their brains that's just different enough that they could actually bring something positive to, the variety is good. I mean, biology thrives on diversity.
That's right, and we don't really know. I mean, we don't know what they may well have done a better job than us. That may have been. It wasn't the best that won, but the worst. We can't know these things, and again, we don't know to what degree we're even, just Homo sapiens or Denisovan, or if we're the result of so many different species that had different, qualities, and that some were better than others, and some were worse, and it's difficult to say. I mean, there's some really weird ones out there. I mean, they found that, was it 400,000 years ago or something in Africa, there was Homo heidelbergensis that went through a period of giganticism, and they were like over 7 foot tall, like these like monsters and stuff with like giant like axes and things, and so ancient history is full of all sorts of weird stuff, really. I mean, who knows? What if they bring back some of them, these giant warriors, used in the battlefield or something. There's probably people out there that think of these things, isn't it? They think, oh well, wouldn't mind having some of these giant berserkers out on the battlefield. Or so I guess there's always going to be some nutter military scientist in it that sees those kind of potentials as well. But yeah, no, it's a strange kind of back history that we're looking at with this sort of changeover with I think the human evolutionary story, the fact that it's changing as well at this time, is part of this shift. That there's a return of lost information, and it's not just that we evolved in Australia. I mean, that's the first part of my work. This is a longer book, really, and we'll tackle America, and it also will tackle the rise and fall of a lost civilization, and that civilization also comes out of Australia, which I think is going to shock a lot of people. I've got an article coming out in New Dawn magazine for July. Yeah, I think people are going to be quite shocked now, because I've got a pretty compelling case there for some of the earliest known civilization having some very direct connections to the Australian Aboriginals, and sites around the world, as well, which show connections. There's basically symbols. There's symbols on stones, artifacts around the world. I can pick a couple places. I've seen there's things in the Andes for a start, even in Ireland. There's symbols even in Asia, Angkor Wat, and some other places. Basically dotted around, you'll find those Aboriginal Australian symbols are engraved into stones, right? And that's kind of weird, because you got to remember, everyone thinks, they didn't ever build anything, or they didn't do anything, or it's the last place to look. And the reason why we haven't reached the understanding of how we got to where we are and who we are is because we ignored the one place that had all the information, and that was Australia. Because as an ancient mysteries researcher, I can say that I can speak probably for the whole community. Everybody thought there's nothing there to see. Right, because there wasn't an obvious Stonehenge or a giant pyramid or any of that. So where do people look? They look at the structures of the Andes. They look in Egypt. You look in the southeast of England with the stone circles, because that's where it looks like it's all going on, doesn't it? Right. So for all this time, we've all been scratching our heads. But where did it all start? Where's it all come from? Where's the oldest? Where's the Atlantises? And the truth is, it was in Australia. And that's going to be, I think a lot of people are going to think, well, he's nuts, he's saying that. But this is a total paradigm displacement, not only of our evolutionary history, but of the rise of civilization, the rise of human culture. We've all been looking in the wrong places. I'm going to say that as an absolute fact.
Yeah. It's astounding. I mean, I feel like every month or so, there is some new discovery that shifts the paradigm just slightly one way or another. And it's an exciting time to live in, especially now with Google Maps and the satellites. We're finding so many, new sites.
Mm-hmm. And the other thing is we find a lot of interlinked sites. I mean, I know. Have you read Graham Hancock's book, The Magicians of the Gods?
I've not hit Magicians of the God yet, but I do. I've read his other books. Yes. Yeah,
because in there, for example, he notes as well that these statues with folded arms folded across the chest, that you find them, he's finding them in the Andes, in Eurasia, you find them at Göbekli Tepe, you find them Easter Island, and he's pointing out, you're finding that there's this strange interweaving, link, like the really early megalithic culture. And again, I've seen some symbolic links as well that go again for the Andes and other places. And obviously my involvement with the site in Ecuador, has been a big catalyst in this, because I'm aware that there's some very clear links between that site in Ecuador in the Amazon jungle and what they call the Lagoa Santa type people, who were the first Americans. These were people that were there well before the Clovis culture. They may have been there 60,000 years ago or more. And that these people, Lagoa Santa type people, are an Australoid type of people, right? And these were the first Americans, and they were Australasians, right? And you start seeing that link, and then you start seeing some of the links between the megalithic structures and the cultures, right, from the Americas across to Europe and Asia, and you start to see that actually, there's a really clear link, and it's very clearly linked to these Australoid people. And I think a lot of people are going to have trouble getting their heads around this. It's a total paradigm displacement, as I say. We're not talking about one paradigm displacement here. It's across several. It's going to be a change in the way we think about our human ancestry, and a change in the way we think about the rise in culture itself and global culture. And it's easy for me to say that, obviously, of course, on your show, people will have to look at the evidence that I provide for it. But I think they're going to find that, it's a very, very strong, compelling case that I'm going to offer them. And as far as I know, nobody else is on it.
Yeah, when you compare the DNA of people today living, natively raised, have the lineage of being South African, and those Aborigines living in Australia, how do those DNAs look standing next to each other?
Well, the most divergent people in the world are the Australians and the Khoisan. They said that if any two groups are as closest to becoming, completely different species or different races, if you like, it's those two. So there's some really deep division there in the genome, and I totally understand why that is, because as I said, 200,000 years ago, people went into Africa, and then another lot 70,000 years ago. And that's a big division. You wouldn't have that division anywhere else, because if you look at the people in my model coming out of Australia into Eurasia around 60,000 years ago, you have the start of the first early Asiatic people. They call them pre-Asiatic. They're basically still Australoid people. Obviously they're closer related to Australasians because they're coming up from Australasia like 60,000, 50,000 years ago. That migration's coming up. So there's a much deeper division between the Africans and Australasians, and that's a kind of, some people would say that's a sort of surprise because they're looking at it from a different angle. But when you look at it from the model I'm proposing, it makes a lot of sense. Actually, you do see that there's this deep division there, and in fact, that makes a lot of sense. And also because those people that went into Africa, they would have interbred, right, with anyone else there already. So let's say remnants of Homo heidelbergensis or erectus, and that adds more division, because now you've got elements from older populations that are already there. They've got a deeper African ancestry, which creates even more diversity in the genome and also more divergence from the Australasians. So that really meshes up. We do see that, and also we see this, what seems to be a deeper ancestry in Africa than really is for Homo sapiens, because those Homo sapiens are increasing their depth into the African genome by the fact that they're interbreeding with people that have a deeper ancestry there, because the Homo heidelbergensis and stuff have been there for like hundreds of thousands of years. So if you interbreed with them and successfully, then obviously you're incorporating their diversity. So that you get these anomalies, and that's one of the reasons why we see this arguments. They say, well, look, if Africans have got so much diversity, and like they seem to have certainly they say some of these South African groups have some of the highest diversity in the world, surely that means that they're the first people, the oldest. But that's not necessarily true, because you've got the fact that they could have interbred with an existing older population and gain that diversity. But secondly, as well, you've got this catastrophic event in Australia, down in Southeast Asia, which has destroyed most of the lineages there, right? So the diversity that existed is not there anymore. It's mostly been wiped out. So you have a skewed model where you can say, well, but the Africans seem to be more diverse. I said, well, I'm not surprised, because if you've got a supervolcano goes off in the middle of your civilization, like your diversity is all that's left is a little snapshot, a little bit of the surviving lines out of what could have been, say, 1 million people. Maybe like 1,000 survive. I mean, you're not going to have reflective diversity of what the population was really like versus the Africans. And so that's kind of what we see. And we see this skewed model. We say, oh, well, they seem to have a lot more diversity. Yeah, of course, they didn't have a supervolcano go off, right? So, they carried on pretty much as it was. And also they have any advantages of any other interbreeding they did. I mean, we can't know yet, but it does seem that they have other archaic hominins in their genome, and that's been coming out recently as well. So there's going to be more to look at there. So again, that supports what I've been saying, which is that you have to reassess that. It's not as simple as people thought. That you can understand this divergence based on these other factors.
Do you think if more money and research was put into the archaeological expeditions of Australia, that you might actually find more solid physical evidence?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there is a problem with the geology of Australia. I mean, as I understand it, it's not well suited to preserving readily datable fossils anyway. But also you've got a vast interior desert with like not many people living in it, where there could be, artifacts and things buried. It's a vast continent. It's not well inhabited. You know what I mean? We've got a pretty small population here compared to the size of the country. So stumbling on finds is not as common as it would be, say, in the US, perhaps, or, obviously in parts of Europe. And then on top of that, again, as I say, we've got that problem about the coastlines having gone under. So where there's a huge disadvantage to finding those oldest sites, but I think they're still out there. And I think really partly that's going to take collaboration with Aboriginal Australians, because obviously they know where like some of their sacred sites are and their burial sites and stuff, but they don't necessarily regularly go and tell scientists to come and dig it up. And like for a start, they believe that you're dishonoring the dead. Like, so I mean, it's a really controversial area. So
sure, yeah.
like so it's difficult, most of the time, like for example, at Mungo, where they found the 43,000-year-old man, they know there's other people buried there, like all around the Willandra Lakes region. They can see, like, as the weathering is revealing bones coming out from under the ground. We don't know that there's not older ones there, that some of those bones sticking up might be 100,000 years old or more, but the Aboriginal people don't want the scientists to come in and take those bones and start experimenting and putting them in boxes and taking them away, because as far as they're concerned, that's their grandparents. Right. So I don't know that, how that will be overcome. I mean, I guess if archaeologists get lucky and they stumble on sites, as they start to look more, they might find something. But I've had pictures sent to me of artifacts and stuff that I don't know how they are, because I'm not qualified to say, but that they find artifacts which are anomalous and don't appear to be Aboriginal artifacts. A number of people have provided pictures to me of large collections of stone artifacts that they've stumbled upon where they live, which who knows how old those are, and if they're on the surface or something, very hard to date, a stone artifact just lying there. So there's a lot of problems, again, whereas Africa has a bit of a advantage in that they have the fossils there you can dig down, and they're preserved, and they know that they can date them and stuff. So yeah, it's difficult. I'm not sure. I guess we might just get lucky, but it's going to take, I think, collaboration with the local people. It's going to take.
Bruce, were you ever familiar with the show Twin Peaks?
Yeah, I've watched.
Okay.
I watched quite a few episodes.
Okay, well, they just relaunched it on Showtime, and we binge watched the first 3 episodes last night. And I would suggest never doing that before you go to bed, because I think in conjunction with our show today, I had the most bizarre dreams last night. One of which, my wife and I were living in this reality where there were giant gorilla apes running the world, and humans were like secondary to them. Not quite like Planet of the Apes. These were like actual giant apes, and it was a nightmare across the board on, So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Yeah, it's all going in there into the subconscious.
Exactly. But yeah, so fair warning, if you're going to watch Twin Peaks, probably don't do it right before bed. Because David Lynch, man, he can get into your subconscious.
Yeah, that was a weird show. I remember it as a weird show.
Yeah. And still weird, and I love it. So anyway, we're coming up to the end here pretty shortly. So, if everyone gets a chance to go to Bruce Fenton's website, it's brucefenton.info. He has a lot of really good posts already that sort of support his theory. And Bruce, I was wondering, are you going to do more maps? Where you mentioned the tree surgeons required. Are you going to do more maps to make it a little bit easier for people to see?
Yeah, I do need to. Yeah, I do. Okay. I do need to create a global map showing the different migrations as well and stuff, and where I think the different territories were for the hominins. Yeah, I do need to sit down and create a couple of those. Probably for the book as well, because I'll just quickly say as well that although I haven't got it fixed, I'm in talks with an agent who feels that perhaps if I can stretch the book out, make it a bit longer, get to about 90,000 words, and also get a few endorsements, from authors and academics. So any out there, I do need some, if you're willing to give me some. But if I can do that, there's a chance of getting a deal to have a print version, which covers not just this information, but covers the American information and what I touched on earlier, the global culture, in one print book, which I'm hoping to be able to get this to come together and to get a deal and create a singular book, which will cover the whole arc of this information in one place for people. And that would have, of course, I'd have to, for that, have pictures and graphs, and that would be a more substantial, project. So hopefully, perfect. Fingers crossed.
All right. Well, Bruce, thank you so much for coming on.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Yeah, it's absolutely enlightening, and keep us posted on your research, etc. And yeah, we'll share on the website, any articles, the Facebook page, and updates that you have. And that's it for Paranormal Now. This is Alan B. Smith. I want to thank Joe Champion, MJ Lucas, and Bob Tarmac from IRN. Live in the mystery, everyone.